The Book of Heaven, Volume 2, Part 4. May 12th, 1899. Jesus makes her content, pouring sweetnesses and bitternesses from his side. She spends the day with Jesus. This morning, my adorable Jesus, continuing to make himself seen afflicted, transported me outside of myself and showed me the various offenses he was receiving. And I began to pray again that he would pour his bitternesses into me. At the beginning, Jesus did not pay attention to me, and he just told me, "My daughter, only then is charity perfect when it is done for the sole purpose of pleasing me, and only then is it of the true kind, and is it recognized by me when it is stripped of everything." Taking the occasion from his very words, I said to him, "Jesus, my dear, it is precisely for this that I want you to pour your bitternesses into me, to be able to relieve you from so many pains. And if I pray you also to spare the creatures, it is because I remember well that on other occasions, after you had chastised the creatures, in seeing them suffer so much from poverty and other things, you too suffered very much. On the other hand, when I have been attentive, and I have prayed you and importuned you to the point of tiring you, so much so that you were well pleased to pour it into me, sparing them, afterwards you have been very content about it. Don't you remember? And besides, are they not your images?" Seeing himself persuaded, Jesus told me, "Because of you, it is necessary to make you content. Draw near me and drink from my side." So I did. I drew near to drink from his side, but instead of bitterness, I suckled a most sweet blood, which inebriated all of me with love and with sweetness. Yes, I was content, but this was not my intention. So turning to him, I said, "My dear good, what are you doing? What comes out is not bitter, but sweet. Oh, please, I pray you pour your own bitternesses into me." And Jesus, looking at me benignly, told me, "Keep drinking, for the bitter will come after it." So I attached myself to his side again, and after the sweet kept coming for a while, the bitter also came. But who can say the intensity of the bitterness? After I was satiated from drinking, I rose, and looking at his head, which had the crown of thorns, I removed it, and I drove it onto my head. Jesus seemed to be all compliant, while other times he had not permitted this. How beautiful it was to see Jesus, after he had poured his bitternesses. He seemed almost disarmed, without strength, but all meek, like a humble little lamb, all compliant. I realized that it was very late, but since the confessor had come early in the morning to call me to obedience, it wasn't that I knew that I was to be called by obedience, for at the obedience, Jesus leaves me free. So turning to him, I said, "Most sweet Jesus, do not allow that I be of trouble to my family, and of bother to the confessor by having him come again. Oh, please, I beg you, you yourself, let me return into myself." Jesus told me, "My daughter, today I do not want to leave you." And I too do not have the heart to leave you, but just for a little while, the time to let my family see that I am inside myself, and then we will return to be together." So after a long differing, saying goodbye to each other, he left me for a little while. It was exactly lunchtime, and my family was just coming to call me. But even though I felt myself inside myself, I felt all full of suffering. My head would not hold up. The bitter and the sweet that I drank from the side of Jesus gave me such satiety and suffering together that it was impossible for me to take anything else. The word I had given to Jesus kept me on tenterhooks. So, with the pretext that my head was aching, I said to my family, "Let me be alone, for I do not want anything." So I was left free again, and immediately I began to call my sweet Jesus, and he, always benign, came back. But who can say what happened to me today? How many graces Jesus gave to my soul! How many things he made me understand! It is impossible to express it with words. Then, after staying for a long time, in order to calm my sufferings, Jesus poured a sweet milk from his mouth. And then, around evening, he left me, giving me his word that he would come back soon. And so I found myself inside myself again, but a little bit more free of sufferings. May 16th, 1899. The Virtue of the Cross. Stripping oneself of one's own will. Jesus continued for a few more days to manifest himself in the same way, not wanting to detach from me. It seemed that that little bit of sufferings he had poured into me attracted him so much that he could not be without me. This morning he poured a little bit more of bitterness from his mouth into mine, and then he told me, "The cross disposes the soul to patience. The cross opens heaven and unites heaven and earth together. That is, God and the soul. The virtue of the cross is powerful, and when it enters into a soul, it has the virtue of removing the rust of all earthly things. Not only this, but it causes her boredom, bother, and contempt for the things of the earth, giving her instead the flavor, the enjoyment of celestial things. However, few are those who recognize the virtue of the cross. Therefore they despise it. Who can say how many things I comprehended about the cross while Jesus was speaking? The speaking of Jesus is not like ours, in which one understands only as much as is said, but rather one single word leaves an immense light, such that, in ruminating well on it, one could remain occupied the whole day in most profound meditation. Therefore, if I wanted to tell everything, I would be too long, and I would also lack the time to do it. After a little while, Jesus came back again, but a little more afflicted. I immediately asked the reason for it, and Jesus showed me many devout souls, and told me, "My daughter, what I look at in the soul is when she strips herself of her will. Only then does my will invest her, divinize her, and make her all mine. Take a look at these souls who call themselves devout, as long as things go their way. Then one little thing, if their confessions are not long enough, if the confessor does not satisfy them, is enough for them to lose peace. and some reach the point of not wanting to do anything anymore. This says that it is not my will that predominates in them, but their own. Be certain, O my daughter, that they have taken the wrong way, because when I see that they really want to love me, I have many ways to give my grace. How pitiful it was to see Jesus suffer for this kind of people. I tried to compassionate him as much as I could, and so it ended. May 19th, 1899. Humility is the safeguard of the celestial favors. This morning, I felt a fear in me that it might not be Jesus, but the devil, who wanted to deceive me. Jesus came, and seeing me with this fear, he said to me, "Humility is the safeguard of the celestial favors. Humility clothes the soul with such safety that the tricks of the devil cannot penetrate inside of her. Humility places all celestial graces in safety, so much so that when I see humility, I let flow abundantly any kind of celestial favors. Therefore do not want to disturb yourself for this, but rather, with simple eye, look always into your interior to see whether you are invested with beautiful humility. And all the rest, do not bother about anything." Then he showed me many religious people, and among these, priests, even of holy life. But as good as they were, there was not in them that spirit of simplicity in believing in the many graces and the many ways that the Lord uses with souls. And Jesus said to me, "I communicate myself both to the humble and to the simple, because they immediately believe in my graces and take them into great consideration, though they may be ignorant and poor. But with these others that you see, I am very reluctant, because the first step which draws the soul near me is belief. And it happens that these ones, with all their science and doctrine, and even holiness, never experience a ray of celestial light. That is, they walk along the natural way, and they never arrive at touching, even slightly, that which is supernatural. This is also the reason for which in the course of my mortal life there was not one learned, one priest, one man of power among my followers, but all ignorant and of low condition, because these were more humble and simple, and also more disposed to make great sacrifices for me." May 23rd, 1899. The virtue of sweetness. Detachment from all things and from oneself. This time, my adorable Jesus wanted to play a little bit. He would come, he would show he wanted to listen to me, but as I would begin to speak, he would disappear from me like a flash. Oh God, what pain! While my heart was swimming in this most bitter pain of Jesus' distance, and it was still almost a little restless, Jesus came back again telling me, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" More peaceful, more calm. "Speak, speak. What do you want?" But the moment I spoke, he disappeared. I did as much as I could to calm myself. But no, after a while my heart returned to being unable to give itself peace, without its only and sole comfort, and maybe more than before. Coming back again, Jesus told me, "My daughter, sweetness has the virtue of making things change their nature. It knows well how to convert bitter into sweet. Therefore, more sweet, more sweet. But he gave me no time to say a word. This is how I spent the morning. After this, I felt I was outside of myself together with Jesus. There were many people. Some aspired to riches, some to honor, some to glory, and some even to sanctity, and many other things, but not for God, but rather to be held in great esteem by creatures. Turning to them, shaking his head, Jesus said to them, "Foolish you are. You are working your own net to entangle yourselves." Then, turning to me, he told me, "My daughter, this is why the first thing I so much recommend is detachment from all things, and also from oneself. When the soul has detached herself from everything, she does not need to pluck up her strength in order to stay away from all the things of the earth, which of their own come around her. But seeing themselves ignored, even more despised, saying good-bye to her, they take leave of her to bother her no more." May 26, 1899. Contempt of oneself must be united to faith. This morning I was in such a state of annihilation of myself, to the point of feeling obnoxious and irritated. It seemed to me that I was the most abominable being that could be found. I saw myself like a little worm that tossed and turned, but remained always there, in the mud, unable to take one step. Oh God, what human misery! Yet, after so many graces given to me, I am still so bad. My good Jesus, always benign with this miserable sinner, came and told me, "Contempt of yourself is praiseworthy when it is well invested by the spirit of faith, but when it is not invested by the spirit of faith, instead of doing you good, it can harm you. In fact, in seeing yourself as you are, unable to do anything good, you will be discouraged, disheartened, without daring to take one step on the path of good. But by leaning on me, that is, by investing yourself with the spirit of faith, you will come to know and despise yourself, and at the same time to know me, confident of being able to do anything with my help. And here is how. By acting in this way, you will walk according to the truth." How much good these words of Jesus did to my soul! I comprehended that I must enter into my nothingness and know who I am, but I must not stop there. Rather, immediately after I have known myself, I must fly into the immense sea of God and stay there, to draw all the graces that my soul needs. Otherwise my nature remains weakened, and the devil will look for means in order to cast it into discouragement. May the Lord be always blessed, and may everything be for his glory. May 31st, 1899. Oppositions serve so that the truth may shine more in its own time. This morning, as I was in my usual state, my adorable Jesus came, and at that very moment I saw the confessor. Jesus appeared a little disappointed with him, because it seemed that the confessor wanted everyone to approve that my case was the work of God, and almost wanted to convince by manifesting something of my interior to other priests. Jesus turned to the confessor and said to him, "This is impossible. Even I received oppositions, and from people among the most distinguished, and also from priests and other dignities. They found fault with my holy works, to the point of stigmatizing me as possessed by the devil. But I permit these oppositions, even from religious people, so that the truth may shine more in its own time. If you want to consult with 2 or 3 priests among the most good and holy, and also learned, in order to receive enlightenment and also to do what I want in the things to be done, such as advice from the good and prayer, this I permit. But the rest, no, no. It would be like wanting to spoil my works and expose them to mockery, which displeases me very much. Then he said to me, "What I want from you is an upright and simple operating. Do not bother about the pros and cons of the creatures. Let them think what they want, without being the least troubled, since wanting that all be favorable is like wanting to deviate from the imitation of my life." June 2nd, 1899. The greatest favor for a soul is to make her know herself. This morning, my most sweet Jesus wanted to make me touch my nothingness with my own hands. In the act in which he made himself seen, the first words he directed to me were, "Who am I, and who are you?" In these 2 words, I saw 2 immense lights. In one, I comprehended God. In the other, I saw my misery, my nothingness. I saw myself as nothing but a shadow, like the shadow that the sun forms in irradiating the earth. It is dependent on the sun, and as the sun moves from it to other places, the shadow ceases to exist outside of its splendor. The same for my shadow, that is my being. It is dependent on the mystical sun, God, who can undo this shadow in one simple instant. What to say, then, about how I have deformed this shadow that the Lord has given me, which is not even my own? The mere thought of it is horrifying, stinking, putrid, all verminous. Yet in such a horrid state, I was forced to stand before a God so holy. Oh, how content I would be if I could hide myself in the darkest abysses. After this, Jesus told me, "The greatest favor I can do to a soul is to make her know herself. The knowledge of self and the knowledge of God go together. The more you know yourself, the more you know God. The soul who has known herself, seeing that she can do nothing good by herself, transforms this shadow of her being in God, and it happens that in God she does all her operations. It happens that the soul is in God and walks beside him, without looking, without investigating, without speaking. In a word, as if she were dead. In fact, knowing the depth of her nothingness, she does not dare to do anything by herself, but she blindly follows the trajectory of the operations of the Word. It seems to me that to a soul who knows herself, it happens as to those people who travel in a steamer. In moving from one point to another, without taking a step of their own, they make long journeys. but everything by virtue of the steamer that transports them. In the same way, the soul, by placing herself in God, just like the people in the steamer, makes sublime flights on the way of perfection, fully knowing, however, that it is not because of her, but by virtue of that blessed God who carries her within himself. Oh, how the Lord favors, enriches, concedes the greatest graces, knowing that she attributes everything not to herself, but to him. O soul, who know yourself, how fortunate you are! June 3rd, 1899. Jesus pours his bitternesses. This morning I was in a sea of affliction, for Jesus had not yet come. I felt such pain that I felt my heart being ripped out. When the confessor came to call me to obedience, as he had to celebrate Holy Mass, Jesus did not let even a shadow of himself be seen, as he usually does. In fact, when he does not come, he lets his hand or his arm be seen, and especially on a day in which I receive communion, as this morning, he himself comes, he purifies me, and prepares me to receive him sacramentally. I said to myself, Holy Spouse, lovable Jesus, how is this? Aren't you coming to prepare me yourself? How can I receive you? But meanwhile the time came. The confessor arrived, but Jesus did not come at all. What a harrowing pain! How many bitter tears! The confessor told me, "You will see him at communion, and out of obedience you will ask him why he does not come and what he wants from you." So after communion I saw my good Jesus, always benign with this miserable sinner. He transported me outside of myself, and I was holding him in my arms. He was a child, all afflicted. Immediately I began to say, "My little child, my sole and only good, how is it that you do not come? In what have I offended you? What do you want from me, that you make me cry so much?" And in the act of saying this, the pain was so great that even though I was holding him in my arms, I kept crying. But even before I finished speaking the last word, drawing his mouth close to mine, Jesus poured his bitternesses without answering a word. When he would stop pouring, I would start speaking again, but Jesus would not pay attention to me and would begin to pour again. After this, without answering anything of what I wanted, he told me, "Let me pour into you. Otherwise, just as I have destroyed other places with the hail, so will I destroy your area. Therefore let me pour, and do not think about anything else." And so it ended, without telling me anything else. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 2, Part 4. Fiat.